panel is back. Piers Pottinger and GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. We talked very briefly yesterday, guys, about the astonishing figures that have come to light that 1 in 100 in this country is an illegal migrant. We talked to Tony Smith, who used to run border control, and I said, it's all your fault, because you obviously didn't stop them coming in. Yeah, and he said those figures were from 2017. Probably more like 1 in 50.
Well, I mean, his point, which I thought was really good, is that other countries, America specifically, not only do they monitor people coming in, but also the people who go out. We don't do that in this country. So actually, we don't know how many of those people might have left. It may well be a much higher figure than what the 745,000 that they're talking about. We just don't know. But it seems to be now that we've got sort of biometric gates there, why can't we do it the other way round? And as people leave the country, we monitor them at the same time.
But do they leave? Do we deport them?
Well, we don't know.
That's the problem. Do they not keep a record of the ones they deport?
Well, of course they do, but I mean, a lot of these people will be ones who have overstayed their visas, and then we don't know if they've gone, and then that if they're staying, they'll have overstayed, become illegal migrants, and then gone into the black economy. So it's very difficult to actually know who they are. The other issue that we've had is because of Rwanda, the backlog of asylum seekers grew on the basis that they couldn't stay in this country, but they couldn't leave either, because we didn't have Rwanda off the ground. So whether or not this works or not, but what Yvette Cooper has done is taken the 1,000 civil servants who are working on Rwanda and has now put them on working on the backlog to try and clear that.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary.
Very cynical,
people. And the one thing you can say about all of them is...
That's a major city.
Well, the one thing you can say about all of them is none of them pay any tax. In fact, of course, they're on benefits, because we're the most generous country.
Well, they're not on benefits,
We're seen as the soft.
No, they're not on benefits.
They will be taking benefits.
No, they won't.
From something. They will be using... Are you telling me none of them are using the National Health Service?
They would have to actually show that they'd paid the NHS surcharge to be able to use it. So
not necessarily.
These people, asylum seekers.
Ways around it.
Asylum seekers get a small amount of money.
An enormous drain on our resources. Illegal immigrants and a lot of immigrants that come into this country.
Can I just give you a point anecdotally? I was in Boots yesterday at the pharmacy. There was a Japanese-looking gentleman, and he said, "No, I get it because my wife is British." Okay. No prescription. No evidence, no proof.
No. I mean,
he could barely speak a word of English, this man.
It's a colossal drain. And, of course, this government wants more illegal immigrants, because the more they come in, the more they're dependent on our state system. And this is a government who wants to control every aspect of everyone's life. And they rely on vulnerable and poor people to vote for them, because no one, as we...
Well, they don't get the vote either.
No one with any money or anyone who's actually in work or has any assets or has a car or a house would ever dream now of voting for the Labour Party. Because it's
I do think Labour would still have won, even if everyone knew what we know now, but I do think they would have had fewer seats.
The migration problem could become a real issue in the run-up to the election, because look, it already is. They're pouring across the channel in ever greater numbers.
But you see, they're not talking about it. No. They appointed this famous border czar who was supposed to sort it out. And the only thing... The first two turned down the job, not surprisingly. The third one, Martin Hewitt, ex-policeman, said... the only thing he's said so far is that the government's plans have no chance of success.
Because they need a deterrent.
So they're doing nothing about it. The other day we had 1,000 people come in on the boats illegally. 1,000 in one day. So if you work that out, it's 360,000 roughly just across the channel in the dinghies. For goodness sake, this is insanity. And it costs every British taxpayer, every illegal immigrant costs the British taxpayer.
This is political manna from heaven for Nigel Farage's Reform Party.
Yes, it is.
Who are breathing down the neck of the Labour Party in 100 seats.
But I mean, the question is, what do you do about it? So at the moment, we've got the Border Security Command that Keir Starmer has set up is just about starting, so we can't expect a result at the moment. I don't know if that's going to work either, because the previous one that the Conservatives had didn't work. But no one is coming up, as far as I can see, with a practical way of dealing with it.
Well, I was watching some footage, rather good old footage of Margaret Thatcher in the House the other day, and someone was asking her about what was she going to do about immigration, and she said simply, "We will send them back."
But how do you send them back to where?
Why don't we start sending these people back to the countries they came from?
But the question is, where do you send them back to? If they come from a safe country...
France. If they come from the Channel, send them back to France. That's where they came from.
Well, but they're not in France to be in France. They're in France to get here.
Yeah, but they were in France.
Yes, but there was somewhere else before that.
Travellers.
Send them back.
But then there was somewhere else before France.
Then France send them back to where they came from.
But where do you stop this process going?
That's France's issue. They came here from France. Send them back to France. Job done.
And also, we should stop being a soft touch. I mean, they come here because, as you've just said, they come through France. Why don't they stop in France?
Because they don't get a nice
good food.
They don't get a hotel.
They've got some nice countryside. There's plenty of room, much more room than there is here.
But from the French point of view, it's not their problem.
One reason, money. We pay them money. They can take money off us without
pay them
working
£8 a week if they're in a hotel, and we pay them 40-odd quid a week if they're not. There's hardly a huge amount of money.
The accommodation is money. We're paying them as well on top of the £8.
Yeah, but you don't leave them on the streets, are you?
But we're talking about hundreds of thousands.
They do in France.
Yeah, we're not talking about a couple of people we're paying 40 quid a week. Nigel, this is a huge drain.
Yes, it's costing a fortune.
I'm
not knocking the fact it is costing a fortune, but
the Labour government just won't talk about it.
But to come up with a solution, the idea of saying, "Oh, we'll just send them back to France." How do you send them back to France? The French turn around and say, "Oh no, we're not taking them either. They're your problem."
You put them in a boat and you send them back to France. Very simple.
And France delivers them back to the Norfolk coast.
Let's have a game of ping pong.
Well, we should stop being so generous. That's number one. We should stop being so generous. We should make it clear that these people are not welcome. Instead,
I think we've made it clear about that.
We've only got a minute left, but I want to hear, Piers, your thoughts on the fact that James Cleverly is looking likely to become the Tory leader, and one of them will drop out today.
Well, he clearly was the only leader at the conference who had any kind of empathy with the audience in his speech, and he gave a pretty good speech compared to the others. I still think it's a pretty poor lot, quite frankly. I think Cleverly. Cleverly's the favourite with the bookies, but none of them, in my opinion, have got what it takes to really lead this party into victory at the next election.
OK, all right, we have run out of time. Nigel Nelson, Piers Pottinger, thank you so much.
It's going to infuriate you, I suspect. An Albanian criminal who came back into Britain illegally after being deported. He'd served 6 months and a 2.5-year sentence for burglary, has won the right to stay in Britain under the European Convention on Human Rights.
Ardit Binaj was freed 6 months into a 2.5-year jail sentence for burglary and deported as part of a prisoner transfer agreement with Albania.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, have your tea. But he came back to Britain to be with his Lithuanian girlfriend, and now he's staying here as he has a right to a family life. Is it madness? It
flipping is. Let's speak to the barrister and writer Stephen Barrett. Stephen, so this gentleman broke the law. He was a burglar, which is a very, very difficult offence if you're a victim of burglary. Sentenced to 2.5 years in this country, served 6 months. He's deported. He comes back into Britain illegally, breaching the deportation order, makes his Lithuanian girlfriend pregnant. Because there's a baby, he's allowed to stay here because of his human rights. He's cocking a snook at the entire law. That is why people are so furious with the European Court of Human Rights. Don't worry about the victims of crime. Let's worry about this criminal who broke the law in the first place, banged up in prison, deported, comes back illegally, impregnates his girlfriend. You can stay because of your human rights.
Well, don't blame him. Blame the European Court of Human Rights. Because, ultimately, what you end up with is a situation where, and I don't really like to see this as law, So one of the publications talked about this and they called it a legal loophole. I don't think it is a legal loophole. Effectively, these rights are so nebulous, they're so vague that nobody really knows what they are at all, or what they mean, or what stems from them. So this office block in Strasbourg that calls itself the European Court of Human Rights, it gets to make effectively a political decision that in these circumstances, criminals who nonetheless break the law but manage to have a baby can stay in your country. And that is fundamentally overriding what the democratic government has chosen to do. You know, we elect governments, they enact laws, and those laws are the laws that ordinarily would be followed. But instead we have this additional layer, this floating office block that can just override us for some jazz hand type reason. And that's what people will be frustrated by, because the British public are very law-abiding. We're a rules-based order. That's what we do. And the rules were clear that he should have been deported. He shouldn't have been allowed back in. And then when he was found out, he should go again. And to simply override that with the stroke of a pen because of something right to something. I mean, it's just, I don't like it as law. It frustrates me as a lawyer because it doesn't feel like proper law. It doesn't feel like clear rules that are applied in advance that we all knew. I mean, it just feels like some external political force that's able to override our democratic government because, well, why? I have no idea.
Steve, if we came out of the ECHR, if we stepped away from that, what would we lose as free citizens of this country?
You would lose the right to appeal to an office block in Strasbourg to do random things, which is a right that I think 99% of us don't realistically have, because most of us can't afford it. Most of us aren't going to do it. Most of us don't get the sympathy of a bunch of human rights lawyers. So most of us realistically can't access the Strasbourg court. It's only a select, tiny minority who get singled out to do this. Other than that, you lose nothing. There are some minor treaty complications, because I'll tell you this now, and I want to be very clear about this. There are a bunch of people in our country who desperately want us to stay in the European Court of Human Rights. And they are trying by hook and by crook to make it as hard as possible to leave. Now, because of our constitution, they can't actually win. So don't worry about it. They're not actually going to win. But what they've done is they've taken the Good Friday Agreement and they've incorporated it into our law decades after this agreement was agreed. Decades later, and for no obvious or apparent reason, they've tied it, they've woven it into our law. So we'll have, if you want to leave, you've got to unpick that.
Okay, all right. We've run out of time, Stephen. I'm so sorry. We've got to the end of that first half hour.